Some pieces from the Bigfoot truck here. This is some of the old chassis stuff I'm not using, but I will, because it's primed, I will use stuff like this to kind of test my paint before I paint on the actual part to see if it's thin enough and all. I always prime my parts before I paint them, brush painting, especially acrylics and things like that. They just paint better that way, and it holds much better. I've got, parts and trees. I've got some stuff laid out. It's going to be different colors. I've got the old Ever Essential toothpicks. I've got some parts over here laid out I got to do some painting on. I've got sort of a little background here to see against. I've got my jar to wash the brushes in between colors and things like that, and some paper towel and cardboard and stuff to kind of dry them off on. Got some of the paints out. Got some of the Model Master acrylic thinner. Some more sticks to put parts in to hold them and to let them dry. A little pipette. Got my Ever Essential mixer, and so I'm pre-mixing these paints before I even start. And then I've got my little water tray here that I lay the brushes in, especially with these acrylics. Even after I clean them, I lay them in that water, because that acrylic is darn near impossible to get out once it's dry. It really can tear up a brush. I mean, it's worse than enamels or anything, So I kind of lay them in there on their side instead of stabbing them down into a jar or something and deforming the bristles. I kind of lay them on the side in water. Then I just dry them off when I'm ready to use them again. And a jar to wash that's for the mixer, just to clean it off. And so I've got 2 jars of water up here. I've already painted a few things, and thought I might mention kind of how I did a couple things already. As I mentioned in my build video, I'm gonna do black rubber around the glass here on everything. And in some areas the glass has the rubber on it, and like in this case it's on the model. I guess you can see that. And the way I painted this is I kind of cheated a little. I took some of the acrylic ink and just flooded it in, and it just went right in into the crevices and made a nice straight, unblemished edge. And that allowed me to go back with the brush and fill in the black without having to try to get right up to the edge and flow it perfectly and all that. I cheated and used it. Well, I don't know if it's cheating. I guess nothing's cheating, but I've used that a few times in that way. This stuff, it's good and thick, or not thick, but it's good and dark, but yet it's very watery, so it flows really nice, just straight out of the bottle. I didn't mix it or with anything. But that's how I painted this part here. And then on this front glass, I actually masked it. All the glass was dipped in Future, and then I used Frisket to mask over, and then I just cut out along the panel lines. And Frisket, I got a video on masking that talks more about Frisket, but it's just a clear low tack material that conforms really nicely. And what I like about it is that you can see through it to cut. The problem I've had with tape before, taping over something, it's hard to kind of see, especially when it's all clear like that. So I masked this with Frisket, and then the 2 little back corner windows, I've got them mounted and ready to paint. They have a raised rim around them, and I'm gonna try to hand paint those and just see how it goes. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm gonna try to do as best I can with it. And again, all these clear parts were dipped in Future to clear them up real nice, and then I'll dip them again once they're all painted, just for a good protection over everything. The seat is primered, and then I just kind of hand painted the seat belts. I got to go back in and highlight the buckles and straps and stuff, and just play with that a little bit. Front section that I cobbled together, that's going to have the fuel cell and the battery. It's just in primer right now, and I may just leave it in primer. I don't know, the dark gray kind of looks good against the yellow of you know, and this is going to be underneath the hood. So I am going to pick out details, obviously, you know, on the firewall, little wires and things that are on there, and kind of paint stuff, just not following any particular scheme, but just to bring out some highlight. Maybe do even a little bit of shading and stuff, a little trickery, if I decide to go that far with it. Just for demo, you just show some things. I scratch built a, I don't know what you would call it, sort of a blower injector, sort of a mythical thing here. And it's just been sprayed with aluminum plate metallizer. And I buffed it out a little bit. I put a little bit of wash on it, just a thin wash with that ink. But I may go ahead and just kind of highlight some things since it's all just one color. You know, come back with a little brass or this or that or whatever. Just to add some pop on the frame that I've got to go back and touch up and paint and bring out. And I added some nuts and bolts and glued in some stuff so the seams are shown and whatnot. So I've got some detail painting and some areas where I hit with the paintbrush different colors that I just need to go back over and touch up. And so there's going to be some detail painting on that. So I'm going to go ahead and just start simple with this battery. I just sprayed it with some black spray paint. It was a gloss black, I think Krylon, but I wanted the battery to be flat, so I did hit it with some dull coat. And this is just some solder wires coming out to represent the battery cables, and I just went ahead and let that dull coat hit those two, just to give it a little tooth kind of for the paint to stick to a little better. Another important thing to mention is mixing the paints, especially these Model Masters. I know I've covered this in another video, but the only way to truly really mix these paints well enough is with the powered mixer. If you stir them with a stick, it just doesn't, you'll be here forever trying to get this paint completely, thoroughly mixed, you know. And it's really important to get these paints mixed good so they do perform correctly. If you shake them, sit there and shake and shake and shake them, the entire bottle will become a froth almost. So even if you shake it like that, even if you use a pipette to get your paint out and put it out, it's going to be just full of a million air bubbles. And it will paint like that. I mean, it's terrible. It just bubbles and carries on, and you're going to have all these micro bubbles in your paint. With the Model Master acryls, at least, they vary a lot in how thick they are. Some are really thin. They're almost too thin to paint with a brush. And some are too thick to paint with the brush. I guess a lot of it has to do with the age and possibly the color. But, so there's no set ratio. I mean, if you would ask me what ratio do you thin it, or for brushing and airbrushing and all that, I can't tell you. I mean, it's going to be on a bottle basis, you know. Another thing is going to be, that's really important with any paint and brush, is you've got to wet your brush first. Don't ever take a completely dry brush and dip it into the paint. What most likely will happen is, especially with these acrylics, is if it's a totally dry brush and you go into that paint, it's going to suck that paint all the way up into the ferrule. That's the worst place you get to get your acrylics. It'll ruin your brush. So if you pre-wet the brush, or use the thinner for the paint you're using or whatever, pre-wet that brush. Always do that, and then dab it. You know, don't pull on the hairs. Just dab it, and you're set to go. You know, you kind of reshape it or whatever. A good brush will always come back to a nice point. So the thinner you can get it without getting too transparent, the better it's going to brush and level out. In general, these paints do really well. But as you can see, I'm not sucking paint. I'm not covering the entire. I'm not loading the brush completely. Just load a quarter to half of the brush. It's going to suck up in there some anyway. And use a largest brush you can for what you're trying to do, because like this is a number 4, but it's got a point just as sharp as my number 0. So that's not an issue. You don't have to use a tiny brush to do tiny things. On the contrary, the more paint you can hold in the brush and still have a sharp point, then you don't have to reload. You can sit there, if you're doing a dash and buttons and things, you can do it with one load, get positioned, and just sit there and dab and get an exact amount on each time. If you got a tiny little brush, you got to keep loading it, it's going to throw you off, and then one will have more paint on it than the other. So it's really good to have a quality brush that comes to a point, and that can hold a lot of paint. Also, as far as these acrylics and stuff go, it's hard to beat Sable. It doesn't have to be the top of the line Kolinsky Sable, but a good Sable brush really does well. The nylons do quite well. The synthetics, they've gone so far with synthetics nowadays that they're, can closely rival some of, the Sables and stuff. So, but generally speaking, you can get a decent Sable brush pretty cheap. So, it's just a good recommendation. You don't want something that's too stiff or whatever. Now, if I wanted to thin this paint down, being that this is the Model Master Acryl, I could use some water. Like distilled water would be best, or just some of the universal thinner. So you could actually wet your brush with that if you wanted to as well, so it's full of that thinner. Instead of mixing it all together, I find it's kind of helpful to keep it separate, and that way you can kind of mix together and get the thinness you want. If you get it too thin, you can go into more paint and just kind of find that good loaded up just with that kind of, that's the trick, is finding just the kind of the right thinness and how thick to load the brush, and that's just practice. And of course the other thing is to have a primed part to paint on. Now this is some sprue. I'm going to paint these parts. Kept them on the sprue, and I'll use the sprue just to kind of play around with, just to see how it's flowing. And just look how much paint is in that brush. Being that it's a nice large brush, it flows, it lets that paint out just right. But at the same time, you've got you can sit here with a fine point and just dip, just that accurately with the same brush. Yet you have, I can sit here and paint both of these parts darn near with one load of paint in a larger brush that has a good point. What you don't want to do is to have a tiny little brush, say something like this or smaller, and then sit here and keep having to reload, and you brush a little and reload. Then you're going to see the different strokes and stuff. With a good larger brush, you can just sit there and just flow it right on along, and it's going to come out so much nicer. And then, of course, just like anything, airbrushing and all that, spray on a spoon, paint on a spoon. Same with the brush, paint on some sprue, and just play around with it, and yeah, that's covering pretty good. And it's, it's better to go in 2 passes than to have it too thick and try to do it all in one job. And same with paint, it's a lot like airbrushing or spray painting. Better to do it in thin passes than to try to do it all at once, because you're going to get runs and streaks and things like that. So, I can explain it all day, but really, just get in there and practice with it. Get some decent brushes. Always wet your brush before you load it. Try to use a larger brush that you can that still has a good point for things, and you'll be already halfway there, So, that's looking all right to me. I'm going to paint one of these. Just pick randomly, I guess, which one's which, I guess. And go ahead and load up a little more, and just get in there, and just could have drug it out a little here. Get in there and just let it kind of flow. And worst comes to worst, you got to touch up a little bit. Just come back with some black, touch it up. Now I'll probably let that dry a little bit and come back and put another coat on it. But, it's, just flows right on there. No problem. Take it in a jar and just spin it along the side of the jar. Just spin it along, twirl it along the side. Don't ever jab the brush down in the jar. Be jabbing the bristles. That'll ruin your brush real quick. Just swirl it. Swirl it along the side, and then just kind of shape it. There's still paint in there, So you don't want to just set this aside if you're using acrylics now and let it dry up like that, because it'll slowly but surely ruin your brush. You know, go ahead and set it. I think I showed this, but I have a little tray that's got some water in it, and I just lay the brush in there like that while I'm using it. And when I get through, after all my painting and stuff, I'll take those brushes out and actually clean them up good and put them away. But that'll hold it for indefinitely. If you've got a really thin paint, like this yellow here, that I've already mixed it with the mixer, but it's really thin. One thing you can do that I've found works is that matte varnish that I showed earlier. This stuff's kind of thick, and you know, matte paint's the best. You know, it really flows. It seems to flow the best, or at least from my experience. So just put your little of that out, and as you can see, kind of thick. So again, you can take a little bit of your, I'll go ahead and use the same brush, dry it off a little bit here. Let me dry this off just a second. Remember, the brush is still a little damp. And you can go into your paint, grab some out, don't dip the whole brush down in there. And see how thin that is? Really thin. That's not going to cover very well, especially on black. But you can take some of this and kind of mix back and forth a little bit, and kind of get a little bit thicker, you know. And also, I'll leave this jar open the whole time I'm sitting here to kind of let it thicken up a little bit while I'm at it, since it's such a thin color. You know, let's drag it through and get a point. And come in here and just put another. Of course, you know, we're going yellow and black, so it's going to take a few passes to. That's all there is to it. It flows, boop, makes a little dome. Stuff dries so quick. Right? And again, swirl it in the side. Dry it off, point it a little bit. You know, just pull back. And then I'm just going to drop it in that tray. I try to use flats whenever possible. Enamels, acrylics, whatever. The flats just seem to paint better to me. Even though I want a gloss, maybe I'll use the flat if I can, and just gloss coat it. Because the flats just go on so smoothly. And especially when you talk about enamels. The enamel flats go on really nice. I found that some enamels don't thin worth a crap with mineral spirits, and some do. You know, and I found some that don't thin worth a crap with lacquer thinner, but yet the hobby lacquer thinner works well. So I don't know what the differences are and all that, but that's something you just have to play with on some spare, you know, spare parts. Because I have mixed enamels with lacquer thinner, and it turned into a grainy mix, and then I've turned and just used their thinner, the testers or whatever. And it smells like lacquer thinner, but there's something else in there, alcohol or acetone or something, I don't know, but it blends, you know. So, you know, do experiment. Don't go out and buy a gallon of lacquer thinner to use with your enamels and find out that it doesn't mix right. You know, it's, and you don't need much to clean brushes with and all that anyway. Just a little bit of mineral spirits or whatever usually will work, and then going back and cleaning them properly when you're done makes, you know, it takes care of it. Another thing I'll say is that all these brushes I've been using, I've been painting enamels with them and acrylics with them, and people say, oh, don't mix brushes for those. I have not had any problem doing that whatsoever. Just as long as I clean the brush well enough. I've never had a problem with the thinner repelling the acrylic paint or this and that. The only reason I keep some of these brushes separate or marked, see this one's got tape on it, is that metallic colors, I only use certain brushes for metallics and don't mix them, because them darn particles, no matter how hard you clean that brush, they're still in there. You seem to get metallic particles, and they're just really hard to clean anyway. So I just kind of keep those separate. I mean, if you cleaned it good enough, you could probably use it for other paints as well, but you know, that's the only reason that I keep anything separate, is I do have some just for metallic painting. And then I have some that are older brushes just for dry brushing and stuff like that. I don't use my good nice brushes for dry brushing. I've had good success before with painting wood grain, so hopefully it'll work out and I can show it and it be successful, and you guys can learn something from that haven't attempted it yet. But we'll see how that goes. Cable connector things on the battery here. I'm going to paint those with enamel, the Tester's enamel chrome, that silver chrome enamel. This paint, this Tester's, Model Master, whichever version you get, doesn't matter. If you don't have this in your arsenal, what's wrong with you? I mean, this is as essential as modeling glue. The Tester's silver chrome enamel. Every toolbox should have it. Every toolbox. You can do so much with this paint. You can touch up chrome. You can do so much. But before I go dipping in that, what do I need to do? I need to go into some of the thinner first. This is just regular old odorless paint thinner. Masterpiece. Get it at Hobby Lobby. It doesn't stink. It's not super strong lacquer. Don't really need that. I'm going to go in here and just wet the brush. Okay. Dry it out on a paper towel. Then I'll go dipping into the stuff. I mean, a little goes a long way. And of course, I've got my For Metal Colors Only paintbrush, and this happens to be a synthetic just because it's so harsh to clean them. Am I indiscreet? Trying to stay in the screen here, but yet see what I'm doing. And just let it flow. And there you go. Let's see if that'll focus. That's all there is to it. This stuff is awesome. If you don't have it, get you some. That bottle has lasted me for, gosh, years. And I've still got at least, well, over half a bottle. Alright, again, I'm just kind of swishing it around on the side. Get the most of it out. As you can see, it's not all going to come out, though. And I'm just going to leave that, since this stuff takes a long time to dry, I'm not even going to dry the brush off. I'm just going to leave that saturated with that thinner and set it aside until it's time to clean it, because it will take a long time for that to dry out. And it's not so bad getting enamels out. It's not as bad as acrylics, believe it or not. And then I'm going to wipe the rim so I can get it off next time. And there's just a ton of paint in this lid. Put it up. This stuff here you can just shake. You don't have to use your mixer on this kind of paint. You just shake it. And this stuff is just wonderful. I mean, I don't know. It's always the right consistency. Easily mixed. It never gets chunky. Nothing. It flows so smooth. It's just one of those essential modeling tools. I don't even call it a paint. It's beyond that. It's a tool. Now, I would suggest getting some actual brush cleaner, or the Master's brush soap is probably the best thing to get. Put your little dab in your hand. And I've tried different things, and this seems to be the best way to do it. Okay? Get you some spread in there in the bristles. A little water. Mix it with a little water there. Okay? And then just start twirling and scrubbing. I don't know if you can tell, but it's turning gray. And just, however long it might take a little while, but it's probably the best way that I mean, this works for everything, even dried up paint. I was totally blown away. I had some brushes that were so dirty. They had enamels and acrylics and everything all mixed together in them. They were dried up, neglected brushes. And I just thought, for the heck of it, I would try this. And believe it or not, it cleaned those brushes like new. I mean, or as new as they could be, Alright, now I'm just going to take a paper I'm going to take a paper towel, clean my hand off. Alright, and then I'm just going to put it in the water. I know it's a little pink, but it's pretty much watery. Do the same, the brush washing, twirling in the jar thing on the side. Remember, don't jab it around in there. And then just squeeze it off. form it back into a point because it's going to dry, and it's going to kind of harden up a tiny bit, but it'll keep that shape. And there you go. You know, darn near pretty clean. Or clean enough, I'll put it that way. And this won't affect your paint. I haven't had, you know, if you rinse it off good, I've put it back into enamels and stuff, and it didn't like repel the soap in it or something like that. I mean, you got to rinse it out good, you know. But it will bring a brush back from the dead, believe it or not. It really works. And I ain't found a better way, anything, other than your hand. I guess because it just isn't absorbent, but it's kind of rough. The skin, I don't know what it is, but that combination of shampoo or brush cleaner, palm of the hand, and that motion, you'd be amazed. You could take your old brushes and do that, try it, and watch. Be amazed how clean they all come out.